Hey everyone, my name is Rooster and welcome back to Mechabellum. I've been away from the game for a while, but it seems to have paid off because when I returned last Saturday, I happened to win the November 2024 Elite Tournament that was taking place within the game. So for today's video, and the video that'll be coming out tomorrow, I'd like to take you through my 7 games. 4 will be in today's video, and the last 3 will be in part 2. And I just kind of want to talk you through these different games, how they play out, what my thought processes are, and I'll make sure to put all the different games down below in the timestamps as well as the MMR of my opponents so that you can kind of have an idea of what the differences look like throughout the MMR range that you might find in this tournament. So without further ado, let's get into game 1 of 7. And here we are. Now, looking at these packs, I don't quite like the fortified spec. I don't quite like the quick supply. Mustangs aren't that good, and I really would like to start with some chaff. So it's going to be between cost control and rhino. I'm not a big fan of cost control. I don't like losing the stats on the attack and defense. So for me here, the best looking pack was going to be the sledges and the fangs with a solid 4,600 hit points to start with. Allows me to kind of lose some rounds early on if it happens to go that way, and still be able to make plays down the line without worrying too much about my health pool. Now my opponent here starts with Crawler and Stormcaller and is a supply specialist, happens to buy double Arclight here, and I would say this is a pretty good starting matchup for him. My units are all pretty slow, so they're easy to hit, and usually fangs and sledges are among the units Stormcallers do like to shoot at least in the early game. I'm a rhino specialist, by the way. Now here I have 2 choices. I can either decide to go aggro or I can decide to play standard. I was feeling more like playing aggro this tournament. I've been feeling more comfortable playing aggro. I like forcing this imbalance on the board because it allows both players to play different comps, right? It kind of forces both you and your opponent not to go into a mirror, and I feel like that creates more chances for me to, well, create an advantage for myself. So you'll see me posting up aggressively here. You'll see me placing the fangs on the line. I'd rather have had crawlers, but putting them horizontal like this and up against the line, they'll take some of the early fire from the Stormcallers, meaning that my Arclights and my sledges will be safe. And they're a little bit harder to hit this way because they are horizontal instead of vertical. Now, they will still get hit because after all, they are fangs, not crawlers. My opponent picks up 2 Arclights here. I don't think that was necessary. I think he could have gotten away with just buying 2 fangs, but goes for the Arclights. I decide to go for Arclights as well. The reason for that is because my opponent started with crawlers, 3 sets of crawlers, and I know that sledges aren't the best at clearing those, so I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of chaff clear to boot to be able to get through those crawlers and be able to deal with those Stormcallers without having them shoot at my army forever. And so the pusher on the left side is successful, as you would expect. I did overload that side of the board, and now we're walking into this final pack of Stormcallers on the right side. This is a bit painful, but this is usually how this goes when you have slow units as your starter. Moving into the storms here, they're able to shoot 3-4 salvos, and well, my army gets thinned out significantly. But it looks like we should be able to get things done, as I have the late pack of fangs here that I put in the back, and 2 sledges getting the job done. And actually they pick up enough XP here, 800 in round 1, to be able to level up, which is quite significant, and will make it a lot harder for these Arclights and Stormcallers to kill my units. And round 2, we immediately get a choice of unit reinforcements. Level 2 Steel Ball, Wraith, Triple Marksman, or level 2 Phoenix. My opponent decides that Phoenix is the best option, which I do understand. They one-shot my sledges, they one-shot my Arclights, so it's a nice choice. For me, it's also going to be between the Phoenixes or the Marksman. Obviously, I have to respect the air threat. There's a Wraith involved as well, but Wraith is banned into both Marksman and Phoenix, and both of us already have chaff clear, so no point in taking that. Steel Balls are tanky, but they're not good into Phoenix or Wraith. And yeah, there's just no units on the board really that you'd like to use these against. So it's between these 2, and I think here I decide to go for Marksman because I get triple deployments, and Marksmen are known to be slightly better in the long run against Phoenixes than Phoenixes are against Marksmen, and so I do decide to pick this up. I don't need the raw damage that the level 2 Phoenixes provide, right? My opponent has a good reason to pick this. I have the sledges, but he just has Arclights and Stormcallers and Chaff, so I don't care too much about the lower damage marksman here, and I kind of care about the deployments. So I decide to take these. I get some crawlers, position them here on the left side. I was kind of expecting my opponent to put a missile down, which he does, and I take the level 2nd crawler pack slightly further back to create those chaff waves that you've seen me talk about in the past. And so let's see how this goes. My opponent bought some fangs by the looks of it. Arclight on the right side for me unfortunately goes down, but the most important part here is going to be this leveled pack of sledges, and that is very annoying for him to deal with. I talked about how the Phoenixes at level 2 one-shot sledges, but that is only true if the sledges are level 1. And so this pack, much harder to deal with. Now, will we be able to win? It looks like the answer will be no. Stormcallers here still alive, split up in a bit of an awkward way, which allows him to deal with my fangs and take down the tower as well. And so unfortunately here, my last marksman won't be able to seal the deal, and second round goes to my opponent. Round 3 comes around. We get Rhino Assault, Advanced Power System, Shield Airdrop, and Wasp Swarm. Now, both Rhino Assault and Wasp Swarm here are quite powerful spells, especially for my opponent. He does decide to take the Wasp Swarm, positions it in the middle here to threaten both towers. I did put some fangs on the outskirts here on round 1 to be able to defend against an air flank of some sort, if that were to come true, but the middle isn't defended and the right side isn't either, so a powerful spell for sure. I, on the other hand, decide to go for the Rhino Assault and put it on the right side, which is relatively undefended. Opponent goes for range very early on the Arclights and decides to pick up one more. Now, I also decide to pick up some more Arclights. I'm not too satisfied with my chaff clear, and my opponent has bought more on round 2. So here we go. More Arclights being added and a crawler pack as well. I think I have plenty of tankiness here, and the marksmen are doing their job. I don't need a lot of DPS, so it's better for me to focus on chaff clear and chaff. I put down 2 missiles because obviously, and I level up this fang pack because it was relatively logical for him to take either Wasp Swarm or Rhino Drop and put it either in the middle or on the outside because of this fang pack. I guessed correctly. The missile hits nicely in the middle of the swarm, which doesn't always happen, but I was willing to take the risk, and so that's dealt with. Rhino manages to get in. I get the debuff, and that will allow my army here to walk into the other tower, get that debuff as well, clean up the Stormcallers as you see. And so a good round 3 means that I am back in the driver's seat as we enter round 4. Round 4 is my Power Spike turn, as I get access to that level 2 Rhino. And here we have both Smart Arclights and Portable Shield being offered. Smart Arclights, kind of interesting considering, well, both of us have quite a few on the board. Opponent decides to go for Extended Range Phoenix, which is a good card as well, and might allow him to kind of play into my marksman a bit more easily as the game progresses. I decide to pick up the Portable Shield. I can't really pass up on it because I do get that tanky Rhino. Adding double the amount of hit points through this item is just such a tempo play. I couldn't say no. And even when I sell the Rhino eventually, it's a fantastic item for the sledges. And so yeah, I pick up the Portable Shield. I decide to range my Arclights as well, seeing that my opponent did last turn. And the opponent decides to go for Launcher Overload, decreasing the attack interval by 50% and also decreasing the range by 25%. But because he took Extended Range Phoenix, he only loses 5, right? Gets the bonus 20 from that card. It allows him to play a bit more safely. Phoenix is still sitting at 115 here instead of 95 if he didn't have the card. And yeah, it makes these techs a bit more playable. Charge Shot is a bit the same in that regard. Arclight unfortunately goes down, but I have quite a few here spread across the board, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Managed to get rid of most of the chaff. The Rhino did a good job, even though it had to spawn in for 2 seconds. It takes a lot of time for him to kill it. And that seems to be enough for me to get the debuff on the left side. And we now have to just go over and kill that final Arclight and those blue Stormcallers. And so round 4 goes in my favor as well, sending my opponent down to 2.7k. Round 5, more unit just regular reinforcements, excuse me. Now, Improved Tarantula is a fun card, but it's a bit too late for me to make use of that. Advanced Defensive Tactics is fine, but it's a bit expensive in my opinion. You can get a similar buff from the tower if you really want the attack. And so here I just decide to go for the Improved Firepower Control System because for 100 it's relatively cheap and it gives you a lot of stats. Can't really go wrong with that item. Decide to put it onto my sledges. And here I also decide to take Aerial Specialization on my marksmen. I've been leveling them. They've been doing quite well. So I'm happy with that choice I made on turn 2. And the anti-air should allow me to snipe these phoenixes, right? They get that prioritized targeting, that 30-meter bonus. And yeah, especially with the opponent's phoenixes sitting at 115 because of the launcher overload, it should be quite easy to take them out with this tech. I decide to leave the Rhino on this flank because I know that he was struggling, and I put a crawler pack here on the edge because I saw that he had phoenixes there. He actually adds another pack, realizing the lack of DPS, but all of them turn. And the Arclight gets stuck on my Rhino, dealing absolutely no damage whatsoever. They just got through the shield. And that is just, yeah, a bit of a clever positioning there, making sure that I put it so that the phoenixes do turn, but the Arclight stays aggro on that Rhino. And that just allows my main army to push in quite easily, right? All of the units on the left side are distracted. And they're not shooting at units that they're good at dealing with. And so round 5 goes in my favor as well. Round 6. Nano Repair is a really, really strong item. Something that you'll often see being picked up early on, and then it gets transitioned onto like a big sandworm or just any big giant that you might find from the unit reinforcements. Here I decided to actually take Efficient Giant Manufacturing because I was thinking, well, with the amount of phoenixes he has, there is a good chance I would like to just get some fortresses here at some point, and we're going to get unit reinforcements on round 7 because we didn't get any on round 5 or 6. And it's quite likely that we will see some fortresses in that second rotation. They will often show up. And I doubt any of us have unlocked them because neither of us is a giant spec. Opponent now decides to take range as well on the phoenixes, as an Arclight here in the back, as well as crawlers to deal with this crawler pack. But I was expecting this, and so now I do sell my Rhino. I repurpose the portable shield onto my level 3 sledges. And I decide to make a bit of a play here on the right side of the board. Adding a marksman, adding some crawlers. And also deciding to range my marksman. Just making sure that they stay safe, as while the AA does give prioritized targeting, it doesn't give bonus range against all units. And after we dealt with the phoenixes, I want the marksman to also have a good matchup against the Stormcallers. Interestingly, my opponent decided to pick Overload on the Stormcallers, and it seems to be working. The Stormcallers are now sitting at 140 range, and they're driving in front of the Phoenixes. So this turn, I wasn't able to snipe the Phoenixes as intended. And my opponent does pick up a round. Although it is a marginal win, and I have plenty of hit points to spare. We can just fast forward this as the final fangs and my last marksman bite the dust. Did manage to clean up quite a few phoenixes here, so again, I don't take too much damage. I'm still feeling quite comfortable about the matchup. Again, I took that Efficient Giant Manufacturing. We do not get fortress offered here, but the next best thing shows up as well, which is Mustangs. Lovely unit against Phoenixes, fantastic against the Fangs as well, and it pairs up really nicely with the fortress, which I can buy myself if I really need to. Opponent goes for Sandworm, which I think is a good choice. Sandworm is great against pretty much everything on my board, apart from maybe the Chaff. And yeah, it could be hard to kill for my Mustangs here. Now he decides to go Replicate, which I think is a mistake. He should probably go Armor Enhancement. It's relatively obvious that Mustang is the best pick for me. And so I think he should have taken Armor in this scenario. Both of us have our actives back up. I decided to go for a similar play here with the Rhino. He already had a missile there, so I will trigger it with this Crawler pack in the corner so that my Rhino can get in without being slowed. And here I just decided to buy more Mustangs. I don't feel too rushed. Again, I'm sitting very comfortably at 3,700 hit points. My opponent is too invested into Phoenix to make a transition, so if I really want to have a gut shot, I can just wait until I have money and then I'll buy the fortresses if need be. Opponent goes for the Wasp Swarm, but because I added all of these Mustangs and ranged them, that is not going to be successful. My Rhino gets in to the back line. Nothing was there to stop it, and with this debuff we'll be able to make quick work of my opponent's units. Mustangs are farming up that XP, and this might already be game. It is just about minus 60, and so yeah, pretty clean game here. Didn't have to sweat too much. Taking that Marksman, knowing my opponent would take Phoenix, knowing that the matchup was good, was a nice decision. Of course, I didn't know that my opponent had these very aggressive, low-range Phoenix techs, and yeah, I get what my opponent was trying to do, right? He understood that the leveled sledges, the Rhino with the item were hard to kill, so he wanted to get more DPS, but it just wasn't really working, right? He maybe should have gone for something like a Scorpion, or yeah, something that would have been a bit more comfortable killing my units. The Marksman did great. The Mustang drop was fantastic. I took this Efficient Giant Manufacturing, kind of thinking about the future rounds. If I happened to not be able to kill my opponent, or he somehow would start winning, I always had a backup plan of going to the fortresses, which also happened to pair nicely with the rest of my board. So yeah, that was game number 1. Let's get into game number 2. And here we are, having a look at the packs. Elite Spec doesn't look that good. No Chaff Start. Aerial Spec, same thing, but it's all right. Quick Supply here with the Crawlers and Sledges is a decent pack, but I really don't like the 3,800 low HP starting hit points. And we have Sabertooth Specialist as well. Now I decided to go for the Aerial Spec here after all. One of the big reasons was it has 5,100 hit points. I really do like Arc Lights. Early on, I think they're very powerful, at least up to like round 4 or 5. They're gonna do great, no matter the board you play them on. And yeah, Stormcallers are a very efficient unit, either way. A bad matchup here for me would have been something like Steel Balls. I think I wouldn't have been too happy with, but this is completely fine. We get a Stormcaller mirror. My opponent is Giant Spec. I am again Aerial Spec. I know I'll be able to pair up my Arc Lights here with something like Phoenix, and that will just go very, very well with the units I have on round 1. The only awkward bit is I have no Chaff on round 1, and well, I don't want my opponent's Stormcallers to insta-lock my Arc Lights, but it's a bit hard to make that happen when I can only buy 2 Crawler packs. So here I thought he would go for Arc Lights. Opponent ends up going for just double Crawler, and so I could have gotten away with putting the double Crawlers here on the line. But yeah, I was expecting Arc Light, so I thought maybe I can overwhelm him on this side. And at least make sure that the second Crawler pack gets in without, you know, dying to 2 Arc Lights that might have shown up. They don't, so my Arc Light on the left dies, unfortunately. The right side looks fine, but the Crawlers don't manage to live long enough against the Fangs. They get a bit distracted. The Stormcallers are able to kill some as well, because my units clump up. And so unfortunately here, my Stormcallers, my Arc Lights end up dying. And round 1 will be going over to my opponent. Nothing too terrible though. This is just mostly my inability with the starting pack to get enough chaff, and so I know what I have to work on. Round 2, again, we get unit reinforcements, just like game 1. Scorpion, Double Marksman, Phoenix, and Wasp. Now, Scorpion here doesn't look too tempting. It's pretty bad into, well, Phoenix and Wasp. It doesn't do great into Stormcaller and Chaff either, so that's a no-no. Marksman and Phoenix are both fine. But the problem is, Wasps here are annoying for us to deal with. I know my opponent has some Fangs, but level 1 Fangs against level 2 Wasps is not a matchup that's winning. And so, Wasp just looks like the better tempo play. And so both of us here decide to go for it, recognizing that that indeed is a problem for both of us. And we kind of have a similar idea as well as to what we want to do with them, pushing into the left tower here. Opponent doing kind of a similar thing. My idea was to position them here behind this new chaff pack, making sure that, again, my Arclight doesn't end up dying, and pulling the Fangs towards this Arclight flank, which should open up the path here for my Wasps. Opponent picks up 2 Arclights on the right side, but doesn't have any on the left. So it might mean that we can get in here. Even though 2 of the Wasps end up shooting at my Arclight, because of the mobile beacon, for some reason I lose, which I was kind of surprised by because I am aerial spec, but I guess that, well, the engagement just wasn't good for me there. Bit unfortunate. 1 Wasp does survive, and I have no remaining anti-air, so looks like my opponent will be taking home the win on round 2 as well. Debuff comes through. And yeah, I mean, there wasn't too much I could do about this. I kind of thought maybe he would go for a play like this, but what can you do? I thought I would win in the mirror, but turns out I don't. It's a marginal loss either way. I managed to get the tower, and I should be able to get rid of most of these Stormcallers here. And now we just have to wait for my opponent's Wasp to clear my Stormcallers. There we go. Round 3 comes around, and we have Sticky Oil Bomb, Extended Range Arclight, Subsidized Steel Ball, and Rhino Assault. Now, Extended Range Arclight, again, another Arclight card. We saw Smart Arclight show up early in the first game, and now we have the other card, Extended Range, that shows up. I do pick it up, and so does my opponent. The problem here, and in hindsight, I don't think I should have picked this card. The problem with Extended Range Arclight is it nerfs the damage to a point where they don't one-shot crawlers anymore. 277 at level 1 against 292 health for level 1 crawlers. And it's just a bit awkward. I decided to put up some Fangs here, some crawlers to protect my Arclight, because I am quite happy with its positioning, pulling the flank. And yeah, my opponent does run Jump Drive. I wanted to have Jump Drive, but I forgot before the turning to change my text. So yeah, I was running full carry here, and I had no choice but to keep the Wasps there. So I'm just trying to protect my flanks as best as possible. Putting some crawlers here on the flank, which is fortunate because my opponent decided to go for a flank this turn. I put some late missiles on my towers just in case he tries to push in with Wasps as well. And so, yeah, here we go. Let's see how the Arclights perform. I had enough money to take the damage on my tower, so it means that for now I actually was one-shotting the crawlers, but as soon as my opponent takes the defense enhancement, that'll no longer be the case, and I'll need a level advantage on my Arclights to kill crawlers 1 level down from my opponent. This time around, my Wasps are victorious, and I do manage to take the win and strike back. Again, though, look at my hit points. I was very comfortable. We only took a tiny bit of hit point damage on those early losses, and yeah, 4,700. I am in No rush whatsoever. Electromagnetic Blast, as well as the impact there showing up. Some big spells, but we just decide to take the laser sights, which is a fantastic item. Cheap, goes well onto the wasps for now, and can always be transitioned onto something else later on. Decided to put some crawlers on the other side because maybe my opponent wanted to try his hand at that flank. And it also just provides me with some late chaff. I decided to purchase a mobile beacon, making sure that the wasps do go for this tower as it is relatively open. Again, it's being pulled. This chaff is all getting pulled towards the side, so there's really not much protecting the tower from my opponent. I put some crawlers in the middle because I realized there is no arc light there, so this should distract the stormcallers for quite a bit, and it might create some chaos in the backline. I also decided to pick up both of the enhancements here, or at least match the attack with the defense. My opponent does the same thing, so what you'll see now is that this arc light, for instance, won't be able to kill level 1 crawlers in one shot. But luckily, all my other arc lights did level, so there's no problem there. And opponent levels the tower and purchases oil as well to try and slow me down. The wasps won't have any problems with this though, they are aerial units. And considering they're level 3, the level 2 tower shouldn't be too much of an issue either. And it should end up going down relatively fast. You can see my opponent added even more fangs, but yeah, the level 3 wasps can tank those fangs for quite some time, and the tower does end up falling. Right side though, opponent moved his wasps again, and I lost quite a few. Doesn't look too good. Got some wasps moving in here, and they do trigger the missile, but sadly it only takes out about 5 of them. The tower still falls. And will I lose both of my missiles here? It looks like the answer is yes, so that's really not a good turn for me at all. I have some fangs left stuck in this oil, but I don't think they'll be able to get much done against the level 3 wasps, and yeah, not a good turn for me at all, although I don't take much damage. I do lose out on those 2 missiles, and that's still 100 resources being gone to kill like 6 wasps. Not too happy with how that ended up, but what can you do? Round 5. We get Mustang, Scorpion, Typhoon, or Wraith. Here I'm pretty much looking at either Typhoon or Mustang, but because Typhoon is not that good into Scorpion, I think Mustang is the better option. It's also pretty good into the Fangs, obviously, and it's good into the Wasps that are on the board. It's a great item holder for the laser sights, so I'll be able to sell out of my Wasps when I think they're no longer useful, and then transition the item onto my Mustangs. Both of us have a similar idea, and we do end up taking range on the Mustang. And here I make sure that I kind of solidify my front line, adding those fangs on the outer edge to make sure that this arc light stays safe. And I decide to beacon my wasps around to the right side of the tower, or the right side of, well, my opponent's board. Main idea here was I was expecting him to, you know, put some, either buy Mustang or Typhoon and defend the left side because that's where I'm attacking. So by beaconing this way, I kind of buy myself some time first of all, so maybe I can get rid of any anti-wasp units. And it allows the wasps to come in at a better timing during the round. Both of us purchase more Mustang. I purchased 2, my opponent purchases 1, and he does indeed overload the left side. Let's see how this shapes up. Now range here on the arc lights would be good too. Extended range arc light into Mustang should be an okay matchup, but again, it's awkward breaking points. You can see that the Arclight at level 2 here is unable to one-shot the same level Mustangs. Just like with that crawler situation. And yeah, I'm just not very happy with the card. I don't think I'll be picking it again if I end up having a similar game state. Other than that, round works out as expected. And yeah, I managed to take a win here and do some damage to my opponent. And then comes round 6. Elite Crawler, Improved Scorpion, Efficient Tech Research, and Quick Cooldown. Efficient Tech Research here doesn't look too bad. And I do manage to pick it up because I had only taken my Mustang at this point, and I did want things like range on my Arclights, and I'll probably want other units with techs from now on. So I'm sure I'll be able to make some use of it. I need 3 techs to break even, 4 techs to make a profit with this card. Opponent goes for Quick Cooldown, even though he only has 1 spell with the oil, so he'll probably try and pick up more spells along the way. I also decided to pick up HE on my Stormcallers here, purchase another one to have a bit of a symmetrical board. The range on the Arclights, as I said. Also, I'm building more crawlers here, and I decided to pick up Underground as well. So triple tech turn means that I have now evened out the cost of Efficient Tech Research. And yeah, the reason I do this is because, again, extended range Arclights, which my opponent has as well, struggle to kill same level crawlers, and yeah, Underground will only make that problem worse. It also means that they're tankier against Mustangs, and Mustangs don't like fighting crawlers that much unless they are loose formation crawlers. But making them tankier with Underground should just help me as well. Opponent goes for double Fortress here, and I kind of like it. I do have a pretty low damage board, and I did click HE on my Stormcallers as well, so we might struggle killing these. The only problem here is that fortresses in this type of, you know, it's not quite standard. I know that I'm playing forward, but I'm also not really pressuring the tower and running into my opponent as much. So I can play this almost like a standard game and just pivot into melters. Fortress was on my mind as well. It's a good pairing with Mustang, but Melter Mustang is a classic combination, and it should fare excellently against the fortresses. And my opponent has now kind of shown his hand. He already teched the fortresses as well, taking the barrier, which is a very expensive tech. And that just makes it much easier for me to make a decision on what I want my comp to be. Showing your hand early, when both of us are still healthy, or at least I'm the healthier out of the two, means that I have time to lose a round or lose 2 rounds and be able to set up a board that will be better in the long run, while he can't really afford to make pivots anymore because he already invested so much in unlocking that fortress and giving it a tech. And so yeah, you'll see me purchasing Melter here. I place them opposite my opponent's fortresses. And so here we go. Opponent does have oil back off cooldown now, and he decides to take Incendiary Bomb on his Stormcallers to set that on fire. Only has 2 Stormcallers as of now, though. Purchases another Fortress too. And he's kind of making a mistake, by the way. I haven't talked about this, but this Arclight in the corner has been absolutely farming the left side. And he definitely should have answered that earlier. Or at least now, by putting a fortress in front of it so that it was just shooting at something it wouldn't be able to kill, right? Because now just look at this. It is absolutely farming the crawlers, farming the fangs, killing those Mustangs, and it's been leveling repeatedly. It's top on units killed, it's second on damage throughout this game. And that's an extended range Arclight. It has 20% less damage than a regular Arclight. Melters, by the way, are doing fantastic, even though my board is kind of burning. The matchup against the fortresses is very good in this situation because I'm playing a more slow push And the drawn-out fight benefits me. Round 8. Another efficient tech research that's unnecessary. Acid Blast is going to be hard to land because both of us are not really moving into this area too much. So instead I decide to go for the Lightning Storm. Very powerful spell against mid-sized units. Very powerful spell against chaff as well. And yeah, I'd be really happy if I managed to hit a Mustang pack or two here. Just thinning out my opponent's chaff clear and, well, their smaller units so that the melters can hit their targets. Opponent buys another fortress and finally blocks the path for this Arclight. Picks up range as well, as he needs to stay away from my melters at least as much as he can. And here I decide to put down some shields. It's a bit of a mess here. It's not really clean. My Mustangs will probably die. Like I could place these shields better. Wasn't too happy with what I did here. I am loaning, so as my opponent, we're taking the temporary range. Because yeah, at 1200 hit points, my opponent is close to being killable. I almost instantly kill his level 1 pack of Mustangs. Now I'm hoping to hit this level 3 pack. There it goes. Gone off the face of Mechabellum. And even though the fortresses are staying alive a bit longer now, as they do have that range, the right side got cleared up because of the storm. And that means I'll be able to take down those fortresses. Sadly though, my melter is kind of shooting at the wrong things there, being distracted, and so the opponent's fortress manages to win that duel. Tower ends up going down, but the left side was winning. Too much chaff by the looks of it. And now the fortresses are marching into my tower, and they might be able to win this. The annoying bit is that there's still like a couple small units here that might distract my melter. Well, never mind, it does actually manage to hit and lock on to those two fortresses first, which means I am taking home round number 8, but it's not enough. Opponent sitting at 733 as we enter round 9. Haste module, just a solid cheap item. Both of us pick it up. Giant manufacturing was offered as well, but I didn't see myself buying a ton more melters. I kind of would be happy with 4. So yeah, didn't see the benefit of that card. Opponent decides to pick up AP on his Mustangs, and they are getting to a pretty scary level. Same thing for me, but I don't run AP currently. But yeah, level 4 here with the laser sights. Level 3s on the left. I decided to pick up EMP because there are starting to, you know, a lot of shields are starting to show up on my opponent's side. So it'd be nice if I could get rid of those somewhat faster. I try and save my Arclight here because well, it's level 4, you know, it feels bad having to sell him. So I'm trying to make him move backwards and hopefully have a better time as the chaff will advance past the fortress. Pick up another melter, making sure that I take the levels on the melters as well, making them harder to kill and also allowing them to deal with the enemy fortresses a bit quicker. Usually level 2 melters is all you need. You rarely need more than that. But yeah, the level 2 difference is definitely quite nice, doubling those stats. And yeah, you see me buy even more chaff as well in the back. Opponent still doesn't have the best chaff clear. Does end up getting more Stormcallers. I kind of wanted to get some missile interceptors here. I was debating whether or not I wanted missile interception on Mustangs, which is really good currently. It got buffed in the most recent patch, and it performs really, really well. But I didn't necessarily want to lower their DPS. I kind of wanted them to just shoot at the fangs as well, so I was on the fence. And I was also lacking cash. Luckily, we managed to lock on onto the right side, and so again that is winning, but left side losing once more. Not looking too fantastic here. Yeah, you can see how awkward this is. Level 3 Arclight there, not able to one-shot the level 4 Mustangs. It just takes so much time to get through everything. And that means that effectively my Melter is not making use of its ramping DPS mechanic. And that is a pretty convincing turn from my opponent. So I didn't really like the way this was going. But I still had a bit of time to be able to fix the problems. Stormcallers with fire were an option. Oil was an option. Here we get unit reinforcements, third rotation in round 10, and Wraith shows up. Now, importantly, one, my opponent doesn't really have anything on the board to deal with tanky Wraith. He only has Mustang. And two, there is no counter to Wraith available in these free unit packs. And so here I decide to make a bit of a gamble and try and cheese the win by picking up those 2 Wraith, and I do happen to run field maintenance and armor enhancement for this specific scenario. If my opponent only has Mustangs for anti-air, I can cheese them out by having Wraith that are too tanky to kill. And so I'm just hoping here that my opponent doesn't buy something like a Melter or, you know, level 2 Phoenixes with range, something along those lines, and kind of forgets about this possibility. Opponent picks up the Sledges, which is a nice pickup as well. It's a classic counter to Melter. Melters take a really long time to get rid of all these. And honestly, Mustangs and Arclights, especially the extended range Arclights here, are not fantastic at dealing with them either. So I like the pick. But yeah, he doesn't have a good way of dealing with the Wraith. The high-level Mustangs might be able to deal some damage, but it's still getting reduced by a significant amount, right? 120 damage out of 275 here on the biggest pack gets reduced by the armor. And then there's the 4.5% healing as well, on top of the 30% extra hit points from that tech. Yeah. It's a lot for him to deal with. I decided to pick up the oil as well, and my opponent was greedy there, and so my shields block most of the fire, whereas it does happen to land for me. You see it's starting to burn his chaff here. It's burning some of mine as well, but most of it is the remnant of oil from my opponent. And you can just see how long it takes to kill the Wraith. Left side is just tanking that level 4 pack for what seems like forever. It'll finally go down, but it did its job. I managed to lock onto the big level 3 fortress there with the nano repair. And left side, or right side rather, not even able to kill any of these 2 Wraith. And now, during downtime, they're healing back to full. EMP hits true. And looks like I will be able to close out the game with a bit of a trick. But, you know, that's the benefit of having some good early games and having those hit points available. You can go for these type of plays. Your opponent cannot afford to make a single mistake, even if, you know, this could have been remedied the next turn. You buy a Melter, you buy some high-level Phoenixes, and suddenly these Wraith don't do anything anymore, but he doesn't have that luxury. So he managed to close out game 2, which was honestly a bit scarier than I would have liked. I could have maybe tried to go for something like Incendiary Bomb myself. I really wasn't happy about the extended range Arclight performance. I think I should have just not taken that card. Still played Arclights, which would have done better into the crawlers, better into the leveled Mustang, and yeah, not care too much about the range. Range is important, but it's not everything. If you can't kill the opponent's units, then, you know, the bonus range isn't really that impactful. So yeah, let's head over to game 3. Now, game 3 is against one of 401's best, Steel Sane. So already we're facing some very tough opponents here. Looking at my packs, I decide to pick up Quick Supply with Tarantulas and Fangs. 4,400 hit points is lovely, right in the middle of just solid, I would say. And yeah, I get a good amount of early resources to be able to make some plays, which I really do quite like with Tarantulas. To me, Tarantulas really start to come online when they have HE and something like range. And so having those resources available to give them those necessary techs, to give them some early levels if they happen to get enough XP, is really lovely. I get a good matchup here, and I kind of took tarantulas, knowing that Steel Saint loves to play sledges with things like marksman, and tarantulas don't mind fighting sledges at all. And yeah, pretty happy with my opener here. I decided to play on one side of the board. I pick up 2 crawlers, as yeah, my opponent doesn't really have anything too tanky, nothing like steel balls or enemy tarantulas, and so I think my tarantulas should have the DPS to get rid of the sledges. On top of that, again, I talked about this in game 1, sledges are not the best at chaff clearing, and so you will see them struggle a bit here to even get rid of those 2 crawler packs. Unfortunately for me, marksman do manage to lock on to my tarantula, and so I lose one of them, where I would have really loved to keep it because it would have allowed it to really start DPSing during the debuff here. Unfortunately, again, the fangs are just slightly too slow. 6 meters a second versus the 8 for the spider means that they don't get in front. And so sadly, I lose my second tarantula. But we managed to get rid of all of the sledges. And I think I should still be able to pick up the win here as the fangs take out the final 2 marksmen. And with a marginal win, we do pick up round 1. Round 2, extended range marksman, fortified hacker, mass produced sledge, and laser sight. I don't really see myself playing marksman, and I don't think the card there is fantastic unless I want to play something like assault marksman. And so I just take the safe laser sights. It's one of those just really good blue items that you'll love having as the game progresses. 20 extra meters on any of your carries is always going to be beneficial. So yeah, I just picked that up. My opponent's still deciding, but picks up the laser sight as well. By the way, he is the Typhoon specialist, so he'll have that power spike next turn. And so here, considering I do have those additional resources, I'm able to pick up the laser sight and still get triple deployments down. Tarantula, Fang, and Crawler. 1, it protects my right tower, which was open. And 2, I like this matchup. I think I just have a solid setup here. Tarantula versus Sledge versus this Chaff should just be good for me. And so I don't mind going wide because I kind of know that I can win this. Opponent adds some arc lights to deal with the Chaff, which I think is a solid decision. The Sledges alone wouldn't be able to deal with all the Chaff. Left side does end up winning. It takes a while, but my tarantulas get enough XP here, at least the one on the left, to be able to get a level next turn, and that will matter a lot to boost that damage and make sure that they kill the enemy sledges a bit faster. Tarantula on the right side does end up dying, but it did its job and got rid of all of the enemy units, right? The Chaff got dealt with, 1 pack of sledges got dealt with, the marksman got dealt with, so pretty happy. And here we get triple Sabertooth. I instantly look at this pack. The 2 giants are just a bit too early and not that amazing against the enemy board. It's also a bit too much of a commitment, I think. The Phoenix is okay, but I mean, I can't say no to triple deployment Sabertooth. And it's a comp that I have made a video about in the past. I really like Sabertooth Spider. These 2 medium units can put up a lot of pressure. It's not easy to deal with these, even though they are kind of same, right? In that they both are mid-sized single tanky units. So you'd think that it's easy to counter, but it's really not, because there's just so many of them on the board all of a sudden, right? Like we have these in the edge, on the corners. We're playing in the middle now as well. I add another tarantula to the board. Yeah, this is starting to look really scary for my opponent, I would say. I add some more Chaff. The reason I put these in the corners, by the way, is because I was expecting my opponent to put some stuff on the edge. He does. So the Saber is there. The Arc Lights is there. It allows me to get this nice snipe off and lock onto the Saber here early as well. And the idea is that I will be pairing that up with a corner Tarantula with some Chaff in front as well, which will make it really difficult for my opponent to lock on to these Sabers, even though they are on the line. This turn, though, not looking too fantastic for me. I was hoping to have a better time there. Luckily for me, My outside Sabretooth on the left does a fantastic job, gets the debuff, saving my Tarantula that manages to kill a Sabretooth and the whole pack of sledges. It also allows my right Sabretooth to have a bit more time and get rid of most units there. So what was looking like a bad mid-round ended up being a pretty good late round thanks to that debuff. And yeah, Sabretooth logically managing to pick up enough XP to level up there. And we managed to pick, or to take home round 3. Round 4. Rhino Assault. Mobilized Battleship being offered. I decided to pick up the Rhino Assault here, and I have to admit, round 4, I tend to just block out the red spells because I'm a greedy player. And those are expensive, man. Like, I don't want to spend 250 on that spell. But it kind of is good here. And I should have respected it some more. So you'll see my opponent pick up the Mobilized Battleship. And as I said, I completely forgot that existed. I was thinking of the Rhino drop, and I put it defensively because I was kind of worried about it. But I was not thinking about the Mobilized Battleship there whatsoever. And so you see me take the levels, put the chaff in the corners, add another saber to the mix. But yeah, I did put a missile there to slow down a Rhino, but it's an Overlord. It doesn't care. It has the range, and I get debuffed, which is an absolute horror. You can see I can't clear the crawlers. My saber doesn't do anything really, and yeah, in this saber mirror, that was an absolute horror. And I'm going to take a lot of damage here because of that. Big mistake by me. Good play by my opponent. Yeah. I should have tried to... I mean, there's not much I can do about this. I don't think it's very feasible to defend this and really get rid of the Overlord. But I can delay it with things like a Fang Pack or some Crawlers and maybe take a bit less damage. So yeah, that one's on me. Round 5. We get unit reinforcements. Now, I would have loved to have Farseer on the board earlier, but I picked them up now. It's kind of the one thing I'm lacking is solid anti-air, and Farseer will be good enough to deal with pretty much anything that can show up right now. It might not be good enough in the long run, but it's definitely good enough for the turn air units come out. Position them on the outsides to cover the flanks. I get range on the sabers to try and have an advantage against my opponent's sabers. And my opponent picks up some Mustangs, which I'm a bit surprised about because I think Mustangs are really bad into Tarantula, especially when I get HE in range. I love playing against that. They will just farm the opponent Mustangs if they get their hands on them. Pick up HE on my Tarantulas as well. I would love range, but I don't have the money for it right now. But that is on my mind. Opponent has a lot of Fangs, quite a few Crawlers, adds the Mustangs this turn as well, so a range on the Tarantula is definitely something that I'm looking out for. Now the annoying bit here is my opponent got a lot of XP last round from that debuff. And yeah, I'm just a bit behind here from that play. That's the thing that cost me most of this game, is just not respecting the Overlord drop enough, and I lost so much for it. And so here you'll see me struggle again. I just don't have the necessary techs, the necessary levels to be able to contest my opponent. And yeah, I take another pretty big loss here on turn 5. And I already took so much damage last turn that now suddenly I'm sitting at 924. Really not happy with this, how this turned out, but I think I can stabilize now, right? Like, I had a bad debuff round, which I couldn't do much about, or at least, well, I can't change the outcome. And I just have to accept that I lost hit points, and then, you know, I also lost the subsequent round because of the loss of tempo. But now I think I can stabilize. I think my board, in theory, is very strong. I have a lot of chaff. I know that this pairing is good, and I finally have the money to get all the techs I needed. And so now we get the range on the Tarantulas. And we cross our fingers that, you know, I judged this correctly. And this comp indeed should be a good matchup, right? Tarantulas are great against the Fangs, great against the Mustang, great against the Crawler, pretty good against Arclight, decent against the low-level Marksman. They should be able to get rid of the Sledgehammers pretty easily as well. Sabertooth, hard to kill, good against the enemy Sabers, good against the Typhoons, good against the Sledges. Yeah, I think all around here, I should have a good time. I want to buy some oil. And I decided to put down a Tarantula in the left corner as well, just completing that setup right. There's a lot to shoot at. And luckily for me, the Crawlers get in at a good time, and so although the Tarantula will die to the Mustangs, it doesn't die very fast because the Sabertooth doesn't lock on. So I killed most of his stuff, and now my main army gets to walk in. Even though we get slowed on the right side, we're doing a pretty good job. The Sabertooth is already dead, which means that there's not that much DPS left to deal with these tanky mid-sized units. Left side, I get the tower debuff, and right side, the Marksman here will end up falling as well. And so yeah, we are starting to turn a page. My opponent now down to 1752. And round 7. None of these cards looking too appealing. I have to say, I kind of want the levels on all my units, so even though additional deployment slot is good in the long run, I think it's too late. I don't think this game will be going on for much longer, and I don't think I'll be using triple or even quadruple deployments this turn. I just want levels, and yeah, you can see I take all the levels and I'm down to 550. That's it. My opponent does decide to pick it up. But yeah, here I just really value the levels. I think my setup is pretty much complete, and I'm willing to just trade levels for low deployments. Take up another Tarantula in the middle, because I did see that these two Sabers were somewhat struggling because they didn't have a Chaff Clear buddy with them. I pick up another Crawler pack as well, I believe. And yeah, this one in the back. Take the temp range, take the temp speed. Quite important, because here I am sort of trying to run into my opponent and get that tower debuff. It is relatively open. And my opponent here decides to go for level 2 hackers with range. Now notice I put a second Crawler pack next to my Tarantula. The reason for this is because I know my opponent is going to try and missile as much of my chaff as possible. And I don't want him to insta-lock my Tarantulas. I know this is an annoying position for him to deal with. And so I'm going to protect it by putting down an extra Crawler pack. He won't know it's there. And so yeah, what you can see here is even though this gets missiled, the hacker gets stuck on the Crawlers. So does the Saber, and it means that I buy enough time for my units to help out my Tarantula on the flank. Even though it does get hacked, it did much, much better that turn. And I think that is, yeah, some pretty crucial timing there. Left side looking good, though. And even though hackers in theory is good into my board, it's just too late. Once I get to this stage, I can just take the temp speed. I have so many Crawlers, and my opponent's chaff clear is... it's there, but it's not very efficient. And so you can kind of just snowball and run down your opponent. And yeah, round 7, suddenly we win. Pretty rough for round 4-5, mostly because I just completely did not think about the overload drop, and so I lose round 4 to the debuff, and then I lose the subsequent round because I'm down in tempo. But we managed to stabilize and get the comp online that I was aiming for from the start. And yeah, I think my opponent here just didn't really have a board that can deal easily with things like Tarantulas, right? Sledges are not that good into Tarantulas. They're not good into Saber either. He doesn't have the most chaff. He did buy 2 Arclights, but that's it. There's one here, no range, none on the right side. Ends up buying Mustang, but Mustang is terrible into Tarantula, especially when it has HE. And so yeah, I just have the better board here. I think something like Stormcallers would have probably been a better call. The Hackers, I think, is fine, but again, you need good chaff clear, and he didn't have very good chaff clear. So yeah, it's late, and I don't think it's the best in this scenario. I think some early Stormcallers, again, would have probably been an easier answer. Maybe something like Phoenix would have been decent as well, because I was lacking anti-air for a long time. And even at the end, I was just kind of greeding and relying on my Farseer there to do the job. Anyway, that's game number 3. I was happy I won that because Steel Slane is always a scary opponent. Let's get into round 4. And yeah, the final game for this video. Game number 4 is up against none other than Jeremiah, another fellow streamer as well. Very fun dude, always has an interesting playstyle, and I know that he likes to play aggro most of the time. And so here, looking at the packs, this is, I think, the worst packs I was offered. It's really not good at all. No chaff except supply spec crawler, but I didn't see any steel balls, and because my opponent I know likes to play aggro, I was just scared of picking the Stormcaller pack and having to face steel balls. I really didn't want to play that matchup. So instead, what I decided to do here is pick up the Rhino Specialist. Again, good hit points. I take my Tarantulas, which I really enjoy playing this unit. I've come to really enjoy this, which is surprising because I didn't like this unit when it first came out, but I do now with the Marksman. Again, it's not ideal. Generally speaking, I would prefer pairing Tarantulas with something like Phoenix. I don't think Marksmen lend themselves very well to aggro most of the time, but I was currently running the Assault Marksman setup, so I am able to play a bit more aggro with them if I want to. Now, round 1, I pick up 2 Crawlers, obviously, and you will see me putting the Crawler here in the middle to 1, distract Stormcallers if they happen to be in the middle, and 2, pull my enemy units away from my open tower. And yeah, opponent goes for double Arclights. By the way, he took Giant Specialist with Stormcallers and Fangs, and decides to play defensively, which I wasn't really expecting him from him. Most games I played against him were headbutts where he was playing aggro, or he was playing aggro and I was defending. So yeah, but I was pretty happy with this. Stormcaller is not great to play into as Tarantulas early on, but it's fine. Like, I'm not gonna complain here. I think this is okay. I would have been less happy if I had to face Steel Balls. I think that would have been a pretty bad pairing. So round 1 here, we do manage to get debuff, but sadly, those big Tarantulas are very easy to hit, and so I lose most of my units. Only the 1 Marksman survives. Round 2, we get Phoenix, Wasp, Steel Ball, and Typhoon offered. Phoenix for me is a bit weird because I already have Marksman, so I wasn't thinking about that too much. Wasp looks good because, again, it's annoying to deal with this early on. There's no Mustangs offered. There is a Typhoon, but I would be kind of surprised if you picked it because it's really bad into Steel Ball and Phoenix. So yeah, like, Wasp pair looks pretty good. And my opponent doesn't have single target DPS, so yeah, I was kind of expecting him to pick the Phoenix, which he does. It's a good pairing with the Arclights and the Stormcallers and the Fangs. And it's a fantastic unit against Tarantulas. I decided to pick up the Wasp because, yeah, I think that he can't easily deal with this. By the way, I positioned my Marksman on the outside here pretty aggressively because I was, again, considering Assault mode. And here, again, you will see me already playing onto the left side because whenever I do this, I just want to prevent losing a round 2 to like some sort of outside crawler play into my undefended tower. And most of the time, people don't expect too much, right? They saw where you're positioned asymmetrically, and so they'll most of the time just put all of their deployments round 2 on that side. And it allows me to get in, right? He does have Fangs, but level 2 Wasps don't die to level 1 Fangs. And round 2 here should just go in my favor. Sadly, I lost my Tarantulas, so my Marksmen are not being very happy here, having to kill all of these Fangs one by one. But we do manage to pick up round 2. Not too much damage taken, though, for my opponent. And it's a pretty even start of the game. Improved firepower control system, great item. Advanced shield device is fine as well. Shield airdrop is good, but against the Stormcallers, I wasn't feeling it too much. Thought it was just going to die anyway. So I would rather pick one of the other cards there that would scale better as the game goes on. An improved firepower control system looks juicy on level 2 wasps, I have to say. Taking my time, Jeremiah goes for the improved. I do too. It should find its way onto the wasps. Marksman managed to level. I decided to pick up more tarantulas just to have that additional chaff there, because I mean, look at the amount of fangs that were being picked up, right? I decided to put this this shallow flank again. It'll pull this fang pack as well as this and the phoenix pack, allowing my units to get in a bit more easily. Left side, my opponent goes for mustangs, which, don't get me wrong, love having improved firepower control system, but this is the awkward bit about these early wasps. They don't have very many counters, right? Even Mustang, yes, it beats them in the long run, but you need to unlock Mustang, buy Mustang, and you often will need to give them range. If they're a level down, they don't kill the wasps too quickly, and so here you just see them die, and then on top of that, I'm playing tarantulas, right? I don't mind that at all. I love playing against fangs and crawlers and Mustang. Give me more of those. I'll get to farm my tarantulas, get the XP, have them level up, and suddenly your single target DPS will need to become even better. And the worst part is I didn't need to invest into these wasps. I got them for free. They don't have any techs. I could just sell them and repurpose the item once you have actually like committed far into your Mustang answer, right? So this is often how these aggro wasps can get you so much in the early game. Now, round 4, I am Rhino spec, so on top of being annoying with wasps, I now have my Rhino available, and the game is being very kind to me, I have to admit, by giving me the heavy armor as well. So this is a tanky boy, right? Almost a level 4 Rhino worth of hit points. That's gonna be tough to deal with. I just decided to pick up the early HE because, again, I mean, just look at the amount of fangs. I go for a similar shallow flank on this side because my opponent is playing on the edges and, well, it's just a very easy pull. I did level the marksman with the idea of going assault mode, but seeing how this was going, they were actually doing just fine with without any techs. Goes for another phoenix on the left. Look at this pull. Just look at that. And now look at the HE just going to town, getting rid of those chaff packs, those Mustangs, in a matter of seconds. And my Rhino gets in without having to deal with any units whatsoever, thanks to that pull. I get the debuff. And even though my opponent used oil and I get slowed, this is just a dominant round. And I'll manage to take that home. Opponent did level the tower last turn, but level 2 is still fine to deal with. And yeah, the nice thing is that I did commit to both sides of the board, so I'm not getting screwed over as much by things like the oil spell and tower levels. I can play on both sides of the board and, well, react accordingly. Here, Advanced Missile Device spec is not that great for me, mostly has chaff on the front line. The other cards I don't need, I'm not playing spells. Advanced Defensive Tactics is way too expensive on round 5, so never mind that. Redeployment, though, is great, especially for aggro. It allows me to move, potentially, the tarantulas up the flank if I want to, without them having to respawn. And yeah, it can create some really annoying situations, right? One of the things my opponent could do is add like a Rhino here or like something tanky so that my Tarantula gets stuck on it and doesn't kill the small units. But if I have redeployment, I can play around that and move it up to the corner, and then suddenly it's shooting at the crawlers again. It just requires a lot of, well, guesswork from my opponent. Speaking of guesswork, I did not guess that my opponent was going to buy a War Factory here, making use of his Giant Specialist, unlocking that. And yeah, round 5, there is suddenly a big boy on the left side of the field. He sells out a Phoenix on the right side and adds another Phoenix here onto the left. I use redeployments to move my Rhino here behind my crawlers in the middle. And I was thinking, well, maybe I can make some plays with beacons towards the right side or left side. I was expecting something on the left to respond to the Rhino, but it wasn't a War Factory. And yeah, this is not going to be a good round for me, I think. I am really lacking DPS to deal with something this big. I can deal just fine with medium-sized units and phoenixes. That's no problem. But a war factory is a tall task. And so yeah, while we managed to get some work done on the left, we kill all of the small units. We can't really do much more. I do manage to take out the phoenixes there, and well, the war factory is still basically at full health. Rhino ended up getting the tower, but it's just not really, yeah, not really working out. But that's fine. It's a big investment, right, for my opponent. It has upkeep cost, and at least now I kind of know what I'm up against. It instantly levels. My opponent also did take redeployment, so it's quite likely this will get moved. But we get unit reinforcements on round 6, and this is a situation that happens a lot. You make a proactive play, and next turn, the counter is offered, right? So here, suddenly Scorpion shows up, and yeah. It looks like the best option for me, even though I could maybe make use of these other units, and maybe my opponent sells out of his war factory, which, by the way, I do think would be the best option. I have to respect the possibility of him keeping the war factory, especially considering that it had enough experience to level. And so yeah, I sell out of my Rhino, since it will be doing nothing against this board. And I go all out and just purchase more Scorpions. And I spread them out on the board. At first I was matching, but then I realized, all right, he has redeployment, so this is probably getting moved. I might as well put this big Scorpion somewhere else on the board where there was space left for war factories. And yeah, you see me swap these around. Try and get as much coverage as possible, and I am able to buy both range and acid in the same turn. Now, obviously, you might say, but Rooster, what if he just sold his factory? I mean, he lost 200 in upkeep, but he's a giant spec, so he didn't lose too much more. And yeah, it could have been a play, but again, he's struggling, right? It's not very easy for him to deal with these tarantulas, and the war factory was a good answer because it locks up a lot of my units. And so I think here, for tempo reasons, he wanted to keep them on the board. Surprisingly, he didn't move this guy. But yeah, with Scorpions being offered and my realization that, hey, Scorpions are probably just good anyway. Having the acid pools on the board will just allow my Tarantulas to deal with big things as well. I didn't see it being bad. And because of tempo, I don't think he had a lot of other options available that wouldn't be vulnerable to acid Scorpions. And so, yeah, big round here. He keeps the war factories. He doesn't have chaff in front of them, so I get the locks pretty easily. And all we have to do now is wait for my marksman to kill these phoenixes, which they do. And so in round 6, my opponent goes down to sub 1k. Round 7, we get Orbital Bombardment here. I do pick it up because, well, it's a good spell. It's good against the Fangs, the Phoenixes, the Mustangs. Pretty much everything. Very cheap spell with a lot of impact at almost any point in the game. And yeah, the War Factory does get moved this time around. Tries to put it kind of behind the chaff. But now it just kind of looks like it's lost, right? You need stuff in front of here, but the Tarantulas will just get rid of the chaff pretty quickly anyway. And he already teched the War Factory as well with its steel wall production last turn. So yeah, he's not in a position that he can sell out and buy anything else. He has to try and make this work. He went for efficient giant manufacturing, which is a mistake. He was never going to buy, you know, more than 3 giants on top of what he already had to break even with that card. So he shouldn't have taken that. Should have probably, well, the orbital is much better for me because I don't have that much chaff, or at least not fangs. But he probably should have skipped in this scenario. It also looks like he might not be able to shield. Yeah, he takes health instead, so the orbital here is just completely going to demolish the left side of the board. He did put down a shield on the right side, but my Scorpions have already found their mark. And just look at that. Gets instantly deleted. By the way, I moved up my Tarantula this turn with the redeployment. And so it didn't get stuck on the War Factory. And instead just cleared that entire side of Chaff and Mustang. And that's going to be all she wrote. Very straightforward game. Yeah, I managed to snowball this game pretty hard from the start, and it just made it so difficult for my opponent to come up with a response. He needed to deal with those leveling tarantulas, the annoying flanks, and yeah, his answer was War Factory, which I'm not a big fan of. Ever since the nerf to efficient maintenance, it just seems to be really awkward, especially when you bring it out this early. It's a massive well, sink for resources. And yeah, it's pretty easy to counter here as well. I get lucky with the Scorpions being offered, arguably. But yeah, I was so comfortable here that I probably would have been able to do this anyway. And just sell whatever free unit was going to get offered. Melters could have been offered as well, which, yeah, would have been another like decent option for me to play. So yeah, this kind of shows you what happens sometimes when you make a proactive play or you're behind, and yeah, your opponent is just so healthy that they can afford to lose a round or two and just see what your response is. And at some point, you're just gonna have to commit to something. You can't keep selling out and, you know, not teching, not leveling, trying to buy new units. Sometimes you just have to make a play. And in this scenario with the free units, that gets punished. And so I get a pretty simple 7-round win. So this is the first part because we're already going on for long enough. So I'm going to split up this tournament in 2 parts. Then part 2 will come out tomorrow with the final 3 games. And we have seen the first 4 games where I was 4-0. If you like this, please leave a like and comment down below what you thought of these games. Have you played weekend tournaments yourself? What do you think of it? Do you like the longer format, or are you more of an EU or a mini tournament fan? Let me know. If you want to check me out playing live, go to Twitch. And with that being said, take care, guys, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.